practice. Yankee Pie. Come on, we have to get an egg for the glaze. Okay, girls. Are you enjoying your mangoes? Just take an egg from the hens and a wee bit of water just to help loosen it up so it's easy to brush. Or you could use cream or milk. It smells good. I wish this was a scratch and sniff station. But take out the pie. So this helps to make it look really shiny and pretty. Brush the egg over the whole pie. And it'll go back in the oven for just a few minutes to help set, because we'll also sprinkle some coarse sugar on the top. It's so pretty. I love it. Just like a real bakery. So there's our Yankee Pie. And then it all sets in there when it goes back in the oven for a few minutes. Actually, I've turned the heat off of the oven because the residual heat will be enough. And I don't want the pie to get any darker. So, good morning. So whilst it's baking, I thought I could tell you a little bit about my experience with baking since I was a wee little girl. Of course, everybody in our family loved to cook and bake, and by the time I was old enough to join 4-H, when we moved to southern Indiana, down on the Ohio River, right next to Kentucky, we could join 4-H. And 4-H is an American farm children's organization where children of farm families or children who want to farm can join. And all the boys learn how to raise cattle, how to milk, how to breed, how to raise chickens and goats and pigs and plow the fields. They used to have a song saying, "Sons of the soil are we, men of the coming years." Excuse me, I'm not deep enough voice. Breaking the sod, brain ruling brawn, when is the life so free? And then the girls' song was, my home must have a garden where little flowers wait. My home must have a large tree. Da, 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 da. I mean, it was just so different. I don't know if it could ever fly today, but anyway, if you were a girl, you learned homemaking. How to make homemade donuts and bake the bread and mend the socks and darn the sweaters and get ready for winter. And it was all about being a homemaker. And so being a girl, I learned all those trades in 4-H. And I loved it. I also raised pigs, I'll tell you that. And I was a darn good pig hog woman. But and when you start out in 4-H in baking, you start with simple things like quick breads, like banana nut bread. And then you progress on through all the buns and the breads and more complicated things. And when you're almost old enough to leave 4-H, you learn to make an angel food cake, which is, I think, an American creation. It's made only with egg whites. And so it rises tall, and when you take it out of the oven, you turn the cake tin upside down onto a Coke bottle so that it can be off the table, and let the air circulate around it. And it's kind of hanging upside down so that it doesn't ever settle. So it stays very lofty because part of it's kind of stuck in the pan and part of it's just drying and staying fluffed. And you eat it with, fresh strawberries, and it's just delicious. It melts in your mouth. Well, all year I practiced making my angel food cake, and it was the egg whites would fluff up more with a whisk, and it wasn't like the French whisk. It was just a wire hoop with wires all wrapped around it. And in the winter, my cakes were voluminous and beautiful. And I was so excited for the fair to come, the county fair. And that morning was a hot, sultry river morning with this, the air was heavy and yellow, and just everything was so hot in the middle of July on the Ohio River in Kentucky, Anna. There's nothing hotter. And I got up at 5 to make the cake and have it be fresh, and it didn't rise. I mean, it was like as much as, I think, less than when I put it in the pan. It just didn't rise. And then I tried another one, and pretty soon we were running out of eggs. I tried another one, and we were almost completely out. And my mother woke up and she said, "Oh, all these cakes everywhere. Darling, let me help you." And I said, "No, it's against the rules. I must make the cake myself, Mama." And she said, "Well, what if I just held your arm since you're so tired of whipping?" And I said, "Well, maybe for a little bit." So she took my little skinny arm and she held onto it, and my arm was just flying. It was if you can imagine your mother whipping your arm around and you had no control over it, and I was just whipping it, and my whole body was vibrating, and I didn't even, it was like I was just part of the whip. And, well, it did get, I must say, due to Mama's help, it did get a little bit more volume. Marginally more, but the humidity just did not allow it to grow like the cold winter air does. So I walked into the 4-H building at the county fair with my cake on a tray, and I went up to the judges table, and the ladies, the homemakers, were all in a row there, and I presented my angel food cake, and I said, "I'm sorry, it was much bigger when I made it in the winter, but by July, it was just too small and flat." And they said, "Oh," they said, and this one lady said, "Well, why didn't you just use a mix?" And I was just horrified. I couldn't believe it. I've been doing it all from scratch and just whipping the bejeebers out of it and working so hard. And this woman said, "Use a mix," which means go to the grocery store and buy a boxed cake, and all you do is add water and watch it grow, you know. And I just thought, oh no, I was so horrified that someone would say that in 4-H. And but anyway, so that was my first introduction to the new world, but I never actually used a box cake ever since, because we just didn't do that in our family. Anyway, but that's what my life was like. Well then, as I grew and had my own life, and I started to get to know what everything did. I knew the difference between baking soda and baking powder. I knew what, you know, different kinds of flours did, and I knew what eggs did, and I knew how to double and triple and quadruple recipes, and I started to understand the chemistry of cooking and baking, and of course then, if I didn't have this or that, I knew how to substitute with that or this. And then I'd start to feel more and more courage, and I'd start to make other alterations depending on what I had in the house or what I wanted to try. I never did things twice. I was always trying something different. And by the time we were here on Yankee, I was quite liberated, and I was adding to pies things that maybe weren't in pies. For instance, an apple pie. This apple pie I had mango and cherries in it, and the Danish tea and other sundries. and actually, every time I've made something, it's whatever I had. And so one time I was working in Italy for quite a lot of time, and I stayed in a what do they call it, where the men stay, that are going to be priests. Anyway, like a monastery. Maybe it is a monastery. But I was the only girl there, and I would go into the kitchen and use an empty wine bottle as a rolling pin, and whatever fruit they had delivered to my room that day, in my beautiful room there, I would bring into the kitchen and make a pie. And I called it pious pie because it was for the priests. And I'd bring it into their table where they ate. Opposite them was a painting of the Last Supper, and the men would sit in a row. I don't know whether they spoke or not. I had no idea what their rules were, but the pie was always in the center. And they just loved having a girl around the house. It was really fun. And so anyway, we just have started to play, and that's why when I made the pie last night, I couldn't really tell you how much flour, how much sugar, this and that and what, and it's so second nature that it just evolves out of sight and feel and the moment. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of my culinary ways. But what I love about it, that is for all of us, is when you're not afraid, you stretch the limits, you expand your horizons. And that's an amazing thing, because even you have to have a certain amount of knowledge about life and whatever it is you're endeavoring. But once you get to a place where you feel confident, in a humble way, not where you would just be cavalier about it, but still respectful of the ingredients and the guests, you can do things that can break all the rules and invent. That's the moment of invention, is when confidence overcomes fear. And what is the acronym for fear? It means false evidence appearing real. So that's all fear is. It's just false evidence, like what if, but it's never actually happened. And with whatever you do, whether it be something physical or something mental, once you can sweep away the fear with a better understanding of the basics of something, then you can just fly. And that's what we're doing.